Welcome back to the Quantum Mystic podcast. I'm Jane Bear here with my lovely and amazing co-host, Lisa Campion, and today we're talking about something that is so important that this is part two. And we're talking about the shadow and shadow work. And really, I think it's something that people often tiptoe around because it can feel spooky or it can feel scary or dramatic. But we're going to talk about really get down to the real thing of what to do and how to do it. And this is like the shadows, the parts of you that got pushed away, not because they were bad, but because they were really inconvenient or overwhelming or misunderstood parts of ourselves. And shadow work, as we're saying, isn't optional if you want to grow. If you want genuine intimacy, if you want to stop replaying the same patterns over and over and wondering why life keeps handing you the same lesson in a different outfit. And, we've all read the books, and you can read all the books out there and repeat all the affirmations and manifest until you're blue in the face, but you're still running from the pain you buried years ago, and your unconscious will keep calling the shots behind the scenes, which it is the shadow. So today we're really wanting to look at what the shadow actually is, and why avoiding discomfort only strengthens it, and how your unconscious still really runs the show, even when you think you're being or doing spiritual things. And we're going to talk about how to integrate these parts of ourselves without overwhelming our nervous system. But really, before we get into all the how, I want to talk about where this idea even came from. And shadow work, it really it didn't pop up in like an Instagram reel someday. It has a long lineage, and Carl Jung was the first to name the shadow as part of the psyche we can't or won't admit to ourselves. Maybe it's like anger, fear, desire, grief, power. And he called it the dark container, where we store the parts of ourselves we reject so we can appear acceptable or accepted and lovable and safe. And these exiled parts really don't disappear. They run your patterns from underneath. And then decades later, Byron Katie were brought forward the work. And I actually use shadow work and the work synonymously, even though they did come from different roots and lineages. But the work is a simple and profound process of questioning our thoughts that create suffering. And although she didn't use Jung's language, the principles really are the same. It's about meeting the parts of ourselves that hurts and question the story around it and bring it back into the light. Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But it's definitely more than that. And then Byron Katie really gave everybody a tool of how to start doing this work. So when we're talking about shadow work or the work, we're talking about that meeting point between these two lineages. It's like the psychological and the spiritual. And it's really about excavating and integrating. And that's what we teach and practice in the Quantum Mystic Mystery School, and what we're going to talk about today. So we'll bring some clarity to all these talking points. Lisa, how do you feel about all of this and our expanding on shadow work?
I'm so excited to talk about it. It's one of my favorite topics. I think it's one of our favorite topics to talk about and something that we do really well. And we also would just love to hear some comments from you. So if you're here, comment in and let us know where you're calling from, and also if you've done shadow work. I think, Jane, for me, like, shadow work is also really connected to inner child work, because inner child work is one of my things, and I think a lot of times it's not a decision we make to push something into the shadow. It happens. I mean, sometimes it is, but a lot of times we don't have any other choice.
Yeah.
It's that's coming at a very early age. And, you know, maybe you were really like a child who was really exuberant and loved to be in front of the camera and were really loud and really vibrant. You're like, ta-da, you know, and your parents just couldn't handle that. So they're like, you have to bring your energy in and you can't be so loud. You can't be so flamboyant and exuberant. And so the part of us that's like a drama queen that wants to be on camera gets pushed into the shadow.
Yeah.
So it it gets sort of chopped off. And then of course nothing ever gets chopped off, but we refuse that part of ourselves. We reject that part. Lydia thinks talking about her, and well, you fit that, you know, you fit that example really well, Lydia from Franklin. Um, and that's totally true. And so then we feel maybe like it kind of sneaks out. You really literally used to yell, "Ta-da!" That's so funny. Um, I think that when we have something in the shadow, it doesn't really go away. It just sneaks out sideways. It sneaks out in the jelly donut, you know. My jelly donut theory of shadow work is you squeeze the donut, the jelly's sneaking out somewhere.
Yeah.
And like then how does it, or let's say it's anger. This is a really relatable example. If you grew up in a family where anger was not allowed, and what do you do when you get angry now? You shove it into your shadow and then you have road rage, or you know, yell at the customer service person on the phone, or you know, you freak out about something in an uncontrolled way and you're like, where did that come from? I'm never angry. Because we're pushing that, either a part of us or a bunch of feelings, into our subconscious, but they don't go anywhere. They just sort of sit around and fester
Yeah.
until we handle it.
Exactly, and it's reminding ourselves that, you know, the shadow isn't this evil thing. It's just the parts that we exiled for survival so that
Yeah.
we, again, would feel love and
Mhm.
be and receive love in the way that our family system knew how to give us love. And
Right.
sort of the equal and opposite of the tadas, which I love, um, is sort of like being the little quiet Buddha and being praised for that. And so kind of suppressing everything and just being quiet to keep the peace, you know? And there's sort of everything in between that spectrum, but we just want to, when we're thinking about the shadow, you know, it's the parts of you that were sent to the basement because the world didn't
Mhm.
know what to do with them. And it's
Yeah.
not bad. We're not broken. They're just like these disowned parts and the unmet needs and the silenced emotions and the unlived instincts, you know. And again, it's just how it's like how we learn to adapt to survive. Um, and in that survival mode, you know, like you said, anger wasn't allowed to be expressed and grief had no place. There was no place for grief. And even like brilliance because someone felt threatened by it. So the shadow isn't trying to sabotage us. It's like showing us the way deeper into ourselves back home. And shadow
Mm.
work is really about like slowly opening the doors back to ourselves.
Yeah, and I learned a very more Jungian way, and I love, like, we should go through the steps of the work that Byron Katie talks about so we can really share it, because it's such a powerful tool. But I learned it more from the Jungian perspective because
Yeah,
I studied archetypes very extensively, you know, and the way the concept of archetypes really also arises out of Carl Jung and these kind of different parts of ourself. And, you know, nowadays we see that in the psychological world of internal family systems, IFS uses parts. Um, and that it's a fantastic modality. So we're looking at, oh, the part of you that's like a child, the part of you that's like the inner critic, the part of you that's like a little, has a princess or a queen or the fool or a king or a magician. The part of me that's like a Jedi Knight, because I totally have the Jedi Knight archetype. um,
yep,
and you know, each of these archetypes have a shadow and a light side to them, you know.
Yeah.
and understanding like, oh, we really have to own both of them. So the shadow side of the inner child is holds all the unprocessed wounds from your childhood, and the light side of your child archetype has, you know, the most incredible soulful pure essence of play and joy and, you know, spontaneity that the child has. So for me, like working shadow work was working a lot with my own archetypes and kind of unwinding and understanding that the shadow side is always almost always trying to protect us.
Yeah.
So the shadows become like the protectors, the guardians, the defenders, the, you know, the gatekeepers, the firefighters that IFS talks about.
Yeah.
And that was a helpful model for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also, um, Byron Katie's work is so amazing, and I was only introduced to it maybe like a year ago, and
Mm.
through another client of mine who was studying it extensively. And so, a lot of the shadow work that I've done is personally is sort of made up. I didn't really know what I was doing necessarily. But over time, studying more, um, of what again, of these different lineages of people who have sort of laid the path, and put that like the energetics of the work into the field for all of us. It's sort of I was be able to name the things that I was doing. Um, and I feel like, with Byron Katie's work, um, she has it I love practical tools, and hers is really, really practical. It's like asking, when you have something that's stressful or feel suffering or have something come up, you ask yourself, "Is it true?" Um, and then, you follow it up and you say, "Can
Are
you
you
absolutely
absolutely
know
sure
it's
you know that it's true?
true?"
And it might be something like, "My husband's a jerk," or, you know, "I'm right and he's wrong in this particular case," you know?
Yeah.
Um,
He doesn't
and
respect me.
yeah, that's a good one. "He doesn't respect me. Is that true?" You know, and you might be like, "Well, yeah, it's true. Are you absolutely sure it's true?" "Well, you know, maybe sometimes he doesn't, but sometimes he does. So overall, does he? Yeah, okay." You know? Yeah, that's and
Yeah.
then the next question is, who would you be if you didn't have that thought?
Yeah. Yeah, and it really just flips the whole script. And I think any shadow work that you're doing kind of flips the script on what the thoughts are. Whether
Yeah.
you're going into the feeling and sensation of, suffering, you're going to look at it, and even just the awareness of that feeling and sensation of suffering is going to flip it on its head. It's going to question it just by bringing like focus to it. And sometimes
Mhm.
it gets louder, and I think that's why people are scared, sometimes think it's like this scary thing. I've seen these videos on sent to me of like this big scary monster. It's like rah, and like that's the shadow. And then really, actually, Moana is the perfect example. If you've seen Moana, I cry every time I've seen this, where she goes up, and now I can't remember what the monster's name. If you're listening and you can remind me of what, it's not Tafiti, is it? Anyway, it's this big scary fire monster, and she goes right up and she puts the heart back in, and it just like dissolves and goes back into this like earth mother, beautiful
Mhm.
goddess. And that's it. Like that, it's like so simple. We just have to face that what feels really, really scary. It's the thing that we've been avoiding possibly our entire lives, you know?
Yeah. And it's so interesting too, because the Byron Katie's work also deals with the projection side of the shadow, you know, because a lot of times, and we talked about this in shadow work part one, was how we project the shadow onto other people, you know.
Yeah.
And so the last part of the work is you do turnaround, what she calls the turnaround. And then you turn it around and you take the projection out of it by saying, maybe, maybe I'm not respecting my husband, or maybe I'm not respecting myself.
Yeah.
So you have to turn it around and be like, who's the one that's really being disrespectful here? Am I disrespecting myself? Am I disrespecting my husband? And usually one of those is true,
Yeah.
or maybe both of them are true. And it's when we take the projection out that the shadow, like, oh, then we see clearly what we didn't want to see.
Yeah.
I'm disrespecting myself, or I'm the one that's being disrespectful to him, and I don't want to see that. So, like, you're the problem here, like we kind of make it about the other person. And once, to me, that's one of the most powerful ways that I've used to let go of the trigger
Mm-hmm.
around, well, is he really disrespecting me? And who's doing that? Or am I projecting that? And I think too, the beautiful thing about Byron Katie and the work is it's really starts you to on the process of examining your thinking,
Yeah.
because we just take, until we start examining our thinking, we just take for granted that our thoughts are true,
Right.
when really most of them are kind of regurgitated garbage.
Yeah. Especially now in the age of information where it's like,
Yeah.
is that even our own thought? Most likely it's
Right.
not. It's just a processing of all the information that's coming through.
Yeah.
And when we're doing this work, I agree, questioning your thoughts is sort of an an advanced spiritual practice, because we really do need to work on why we're avoiding that pain, especially when it's like felt sense. We feel like our body has taught us that this is dangerous, this is too much, and we go into this like fight, flight, or freeze reaction when we're in a completely safe environment. Everything around us is not depicting what we're actually feeling. And so every time we're replaying that story, even if it's unconscious, which it most likely is, it's living in the subconscious where the shadow lives in that, dark cauldron. The body's listening. It's like being triggered again and going back into the freeze or fight or
Mhm.
whatever it is. So that pain, again, it doesn't it doesn't disappear just because we're ignoring it. It really goes deeper and deeper and becomes more. I see the energy becoming almost more calcified and rigid and kind of like thicker and harder over time.
Mm.
So and like you said, it leaks out sideways, whether in relationships or reactions, for sure in relationships, or
Yeah.
because we procrastinate, or, patterns just repeat themselves until we face that pain, even for a little moment, because that begins to unwind that spell that we're kind of casting over ourselves.
Yeah, and it's like the cycle of acceptance, like, and if you want to do shadow work, you basically need to accept
Yeah.
yourself. So shadow work is a rejection of ourself, our feelings, or whatever, our parts of ourself. And so if you can really look at that part of you that is greedy or selfish or mean or, whatever, angry, and you're like, can I accept that? You know, for me, it's about accepting that that's real. And I'm such a Star Wars fan, right? So, I'm going to bring this back to Darth Vader
Uh-huh.
and Luke Skywalker. Like, Luke Skywalker is only in the light because he's fully accepted that he could be Darth Vader.
Yeah.
We have to fully accept that we have that level of darkness, or I've had to do this. Not everybody does, but that I have that level of darkness inside of me. I'm just really dedicated to not acting it out.
Yeah.
Shadow work doesn't mean I'm going to kill people or, become a raging, maniac. But I have to acknowledge that I could.
Yeah.
And it's just literally a moment by moment choice that I don't, you know, it's not quite that bad, but
It's not that bad. She's being dramatic. But it is it is true when to be really, really radically honest with ourselves as we're doing this work. And it gets really granular because we have a lot of conditioning that isn't necessarily with our family, but it's with it's with like, um, you know, our society, or it's with the collective, like it- being really honest about the colonizer within all of us, or being really honest about you know, I'm going to be really edgy here, like the racist within us, like where in us has that been handed down from, great
Yeah.
great grandparents or whatever it is. There's all this stuff that is it's if we and it's not, if we look at it, it doesn't make it real. It doesn't mean it's going to contaminate us and suddenly we're going to be like these raging, racists or whatever. Like it's just looking so that it can diffuse it, so that it can
Yeah.
soften it, bring awareness to it. So it almost, like you said, like that evil part, quote unquote evil, I don't know that actually calling it evil, but that um that part of us, like that Luke Skywalker had to look within
Right.
himself, like
Yeah.
that was handed down to him.
Sure. And that's such a great point, because we have our personal shadow, but there's also the shadow of the families that we grow up in,
Yeah.
that get installed in us. And then there's the collective shadow, like you said, that has all of the isms, that
Yes.
we don't have too much choice about those. Those get downloaded into our psyche as just being humans on the planet, or
Yeah.
from this particular culture, you know. Um, from New England or from Boston or from whatever, you know, what all the things that there's so much not truth in there. There's so much that you might not believe, but it's still like playing out in your subconscious as part of your conditioning,
Yeah.
as we've got domesticated, we kind of buy all that stuff. We get programmed with it, and it's lurking in our subconscious until we sort of clean that out. Cleaning out the subconscious is sort of like, you know, cleaning out the sewer.
Yeah.
That's what it's like. What'd you flush down there that's still lurking, like an alligator still lurking around in the sewer?
Totally. And as
Mm.
sometimes we need to, like, take a big vacuum and we can suck a bunch of it out, but other
Yep.
times we need to, like, literally get a sponge and we're down there on hands and knees and we're scrubbing out the little the little parts. And yeah, it's true. I grew up in Minnesota, and I had this, like, I'm a northerner. I didn't even know what that meant. You know what I
I
mean?
know, I'm a New Englander. It's a big thing.
And so, and once I moved away, I just sort of laughed. It's like, what is that identity? What did it even mean?
I
It
don't
means
know.
nothing. At this point, it means nothing. It has no relevance. And that might be not be true. Somebody may really identify with that. But it was a good teaching point for myself,
It's
once I
cool.
realized that.
Yeah, we don't know how much we cotton onto those identities until we start deconstructing them. And I think for me, the other place where shadow work really is good is in my dreams, because I'm a dreamer and
Mm,
I remember my dreams every night. I wake up and I write them down and I think about them. And I often encounter shadow aspect, because dreaming is how we directly connect with our subconscious. It's like direct access in there. And I'll be like, what was that? Like and the way that Jung recommended we do dream analysis is to say that every character in the dream is an aspect of you.
yeah.
So the big scary monster that's chasing you in the dream is an aspect of you. The person that shows up that you hate is an aspect of you. Like this violence or conflict or whatever is going on, you're running through the scary haunted house. Well, that haunted house is your own psyche, and the monsters are you. And
Yeah.
so I love that. And I often have make great gains in my shadow work by doing really deeply doing dream analysis.
Mm,
and and I find it's so funny to say this, but I find chat GPT and Claude, the AI, is extremely good at dream analysis.
Well,
So if you have a
especially
dream and you don't know what it is, ask chat to help you interpret the dream.
especially when you ask it to be a Carl Jung dream analysis expert.
Right.
They give very specific directions.
Yes. It's so good for that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I really I get probably more than any other technique, dream analysis is what has helped me the most.
Interesting. Huh. I'm not a huge dreamer. I'm sure that I do dream sometimes. I just don't remember them very often. So a lot of my work has been in this waking dream.
Mm.
And doing, and this is why I'm so into embodiment and teaching the importance of working with your physical body to do this work, because it really, all the answers are there. That's how I found.
Mm.
And so when we're into talking about doing this work, shadow work, the work, it's really about integration, and it's a process. And we don't dive head on into the abyss. We're creating relationship with the felt sense, at least in this way, or whatever is coming up and that was exiled. We're slowly and deliberately and in the present moment, um, you know sort of witnessing um, whatever it is that's coming up. And it could be the story loops, or it could be the inner critic, or it could be our body feeling triggered. That's that awareness of whatever it is that first doorway.
Right.
And then, if we can just sit in presence for 2 minutes with like a difficult emotion, that is transformative. That's
Mhm.
even more transformative than like 2 hours of spiraling and continuing the same like thought process or trigger or felt sense, you know, because we're rewriting that story in that time. And then, I think with when we're when we're in the present moment, we can meet any emotion, and it will give, and knowing that most likely it's coming from a shadow place, right? And that gives somewhere, when we're doing that work in the present moment, it gives that shadow a place to land instead of doing the spiraling thing. And then also bringing curiosity, I think for me is really, really huge.
Yeah.
Because if we're judging, like, oh, I'm spiraling, here it is again, I can't move, we're getting all super judgy because we're trying to protect we're trying to protect ourselves.
Right.
We're Instead, we're just bringing curiosity. Well, what do you need? What is the unmet truth underneath that reaction, you
I
know?
think curiosity is a really good way to stay out of judgment,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's like the higher vibe of judgment. If you're just curious, you're not judging.
yes, exactly. And you're not
Yeah.
fighting that shadow, you're not fighting those lost parts of ourselves. So that's where, shadow work really becomes like a reclamation.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
And like curiosity also helps with that acceptance, because basically we're accepting, we're acknowledging, we're looking, we're like, I
yeah,
see you, I accept you,
yeah,
I'm not going to act you out, but I see you and accept you.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And just for it is the Moana woman is Tafiti. Just for those of you who were curious, it's Tafiti who I was referring to. But yeah, this is such an important conversation that we wanted to, dive deeper into it again and talk more about it. I think we could probably have 12 more episodes about shadow work and the integration of how to do this work, because it's a constant. If you're on the spiritual path, you're going to be met with this with doing this work in some capacity. And, again, Lisa and I have the Quantum Mystic mystery school, which is about expanding your consciousness. And the way to do that is to really um, do this work where the rubber meets the road, and really, really put in the time and the work and the effort for yourselves and for your own expansion. So, you know, we're passionate about this, and we're glad that you were here listening. And yeah, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.